And I've been going live every single day this week, which is very unusual for me, but I guess I just got a lot to say. So I want to talk to you today about when I learned or when I found out that I was inferior. Let me ask you a question. When did you learn that you were inferior? Now, this is a conversation for everybody. This is a conversation that I want to have with everybody, but this is specifically to African Americans. Okay, I want to learn, I want to know when you learned that you were inferior. Because I'm going to share with you when I learned I was inferior. There were many times throughout my life that I was told or I felt either overtly or covertly that I was inferior. And so I want to ask you, Janet, I want to ask you, Nene, when did you learn that you were inferior? And I'm not saying well, I ain't inferior because I ain't nobody better than me. But there were some things that have happened in your life. If you grew up in America, there are some things that happened in your life that told you or showed you that you were inferior. And I just want to share a couple of times in my life where I was told or I was showed that I was inferior. Hey, Fionn, I'm just talking about when I learned that I was inferior. And so I was asking the question, when were you told or showed that you were inferior, Tip Tip? When were you told or showed that you were inferior? And again, I want you to tell me when you were told or showed you were inferior. And when I'm talking about that, I'm not saying that you believe that you're inferior, but these are things that people showed you or told you. And if you live in this country and you are either a woman or a minority, you've been told in one way that you were inferior. And I'm just speaking up to my experience as a Black woman. I'm speaking to my experience as a Black person, as a woman, and as a Black woman. And I'm going to tell you a couple of times where I was either told or I was showed that I was inferior. When I was 4 years old, I wanted this doll. It was a Baby Alive doll, and I had wanted it for months. I asked my mom, my big mom, I don't know, it may have been months, it may have been weeks, but I remember I asked my mom for this Baby Alive doll, and finally she brought home this doll, and I was so excited. I was so excited, ripped the box open, and I was excited, and then I saw the doll, and I immediately started to cry. The reason why I started to cry, and I said, this doll is ugly. The reason why I started to cry is because it was Black. And I wanted the white doll. It wasn't the same doll. Even though the Baby Alive doll, it still ate and drank and pooped and peed and everything else, it was Black and it looked exactly the same as the white doll. But for some reason, subliminally, at 4 years old, I thought this Black doll, which was exactly like this white doll, was ugly. And it was because whatever I saw on TV, the standard of beauty looked like that white doll, and it didn't look like that Black doll. And so in some way, at 4 years old, I didn't even realize that I thought that Black was ugly, Black was bad. And then when I got into elementary school, I found out that I was inferior when I learned about Dr. Martin Luther King. I only learned about the struggle of Black people, right? I only learned about the struggle, slavery, and Martin Luther King. I didn't learn that Black people were kings and queens. I didn't learn that we did anything of any magnitude. I didn't learn that we were inventors. I didn't learn that we fought. I learned that we were victims in elementary school. They looked like me, and they were inferior. And then I remember I had a friend. She was my best friend, and she was Filipino, and she was the same complexion as me, and she liked a Mexican guy. And the Mexican boy said, I don't like her because she's too dark. She was the same color as me. Oh, he didn't like her because she was dark. So my color is bad. And then I worked at elementary school. That's when I was first called a nigger. And in elementary school, that's when I was laughed at, because I had, my hair texture or whatever. I learned that I was inferior there. But I learned it in school too, as to what I was taught about people who looked like me. I wasn't taught about the strengths and the battles that Black people fought and won. I was only taught about the things that we lost in elementary school. Then in high school, I was taught, I learned that I was inferior when I was put in a at-risk program. And I remember I was put in this at-risk program and with only Black and Mexican children. And I was like, well, why? What constitutes me to be in this at-risk program that you deem that I need to be in? because I was an honor student. I was in the orchestra. I was in leadership. Why am I? And I asked the teacher, why am I in this at-risk program? Why did you deem me to be in here with everybody else? And they said, well, you fit the criteria of being at risk. Well, what does that mean? Everybody else in the class looked just like me. They were minority, they were Black or Latino. And so that was a program for the, I want to say, inferior people. And then I learned, I remember sitting down and talking to my counselor as I was on my way out to college. And I was telling him about my goals and aspirations. And he told me, you know what, don't even worry about going to a four-year university. You should apply at De Anza College. It's cheaper. You definitely get in there. Now, mind you, I could have graduated a whole year earlier than I graduated. And my GPA was on point. My resume was on point, but I was encouraged to not even look at going to a four-year college. It probably had something to do with me being inferior. And then even when I graduated from high school and I had jobs, and when I was the manager of a real estate company, and I would go to the meetings, and there were nothing but men who didn't look like me, white men. And they would say things like, oh, they would talk about, oh, in Oakland, they don't pass real estate tests. Well, what does that mean? In Oakland, they don't pass tests in Oakland. Somebody joked and said that. And I'll never forget the look on the CEO's face when he looked at me and he was beet red. And he was like, oh, Oakland, the architecture is much better than San Francisco. He tried to clean it up for him because they weren't used to having me in there. They were used to making those little jokes about inferior people like me. And then when I decided to go ahead and open up my own real estate firm, and I was excitedly telling somebody about a counterpart who had opened up his real estate firm a year earlier. And they told me that I wouldn't be as successful as him because I was Black and I'm a woman. And he was white and he was a man. Oh, because that was part of that inferiority thing. Yeah. So even in having a business and dealing with people, you know, I could deal with people who are of other races. I could deal with Indian client, and they'll say, I want to live in a certain area because most people, you know, my people live in this area and I want to live by my people. I'll deal with a Hispanic family and they'll say, I want to live over here on the east side because this is where my people live. Then I'll deal with a Black family and they will go down to a neighborhood and they'll see another Black person over there and they won't want to live on that street because there's another Black person there. So we have an inferiority complex about ourselves that has been ingrained in some way, some shape, or some form by experiences, by messaging, by what we've learned growing up, by what's been on TV, by what's been in the media. And so that has to change. It wasn't until later on in life that I learned about that Black people came from kings and queens, and that we built pyramids, and that even to this day, they wonder why or how these pyramids were built without any modern technology, how these bricks were space were 1/100th of an inch to the space. And these were built by people of color, but we never learned that because, you know, they wanted you to believe that Europeans built this. They came over to Africa and built this. And then when I learned about Black Wall Street, because I only had learned that Black people were good for slavery, we were still trying to overcome, we were still struggling. And when I learned things like Black Wall Street and learned that even through adversity, even through the struggle, even through discrimination and systematic racism, they were still able to overcome that and build a town of Black people who had buses and airports and hospitals and just upper middle class businesses. And the dollar circulated a year before it went out, before it left. And then some jealous white people got mad and burnt down the town and killed a bunch of the people. And then they were resilient and they built it back up again. Not as strong as it was before, but they built it back up again. There was like 200 businesses. And then it was destroyed again. You know how? Integration. Because now we don't have to do business with other inferior people like us. We can do business with other people. While other communities are doing business with themselves. Now, I'm not saying to discriminate or do business not do business with a certain person or a certain demographic. I think that we should all do business together. But it's something to be said when you refuse to do business with a certain person because of their race. And that's the reason why I love what we have here at Catalyst Real Estate Professionals. I said all that to say that seeing life from different lenses is so important. Having people come from all these different walks of lives is so important, because you can see how other people think. We had a discussion last week at Mastermind, and somebody mentioned that somebody said, well, why do you work at this company where there's mostly Black people? People are still having this discussion. We know internally what we mean to one another. And we know internally that we are a reflection of the community. And as such, we want to help everybody in the community. But other people don't see it like that. And I think what needs to happen is we need to change the dynamic, and we need to change the conversation. The conversation needs to be changed so that everybody can be celebrated. Everybody can be uplifted. Everybody has made beautiful contributions in this world. But when you have a history that's always telling people that you're inferior, and you have things like the pipeline to prison and things like that, specifically designed to keep certain people, keep certain people down, and only celebrating one group of people. Diversity is so important. And that's the reason why, I believe in being a catalyst for change. That's the reason why it's important for us to have people from all walks of life working in one space. That's the reason why we have an open and collaborative environment, so that we can collaborate with one another. The synergy is great, and that we can go out and reach the community. I love, love, love working with this group and it's mostly women. We got a couple of men. But I love working with them because they come from all these different places. And no matter what people from the outside say is, it's mostly Black people over there. We're mostly people. Yes, we are the largest African-American owned real estate firm in Northern California, because I happen to be Black and I happen to be the owner. But we service people from everywhere in all walks of life. And that's the beauty of it. So I'm not saying don't do business with other people because they're a specific race. I'm saying do business with anybody, and don't base it off of what you think they are because of a stereotypical thing, because you think that they're inferior. I'm so glad when I was 7 years old, my aunt told me that I was equally as important as the President of the United States. She said, you're no worse or you're no better, but you're equally as important as anyone, just because of who you are and because of God loves you. So I challenge you today, ladies and gentlemen, I challenge you to start thinking differently. Start looking at people differently. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't be afraid of people. We're not all the same. Work with everyone. Love everyone. Celebrate everyone. Empower and inspire everyone. Know this. You are absolutely not inferior to anybody. And no one is superior to you. We are all the same in God's eyes. So take care and God bless. Peace out.